Hi, everybody. I'm Mr. Wally of the Jackson County Library Services. How are you doing today? You're in my library this afternoon, and I'm so glad to see you. You're probably wondering, Mr. Wally, what do you have that's underneath your mustache there? It's my mask. But if I leave it on when I'm doing my story, you might not be able to hear me. So I'll go ahead and tuck it right there. So, you're here for a tale? Let's go. I'm going to tell you today the story of the Master Cat, or as some like to call it, Puss in Boots. And this is how the story goes. Once upon a time there was, and twice upon a time there wasn't, a miller who had 3 sons. And the years went by, and the miller grew old, and one day the miller passed away. Well, back in those days, there wasn't an awful lot for father to pass down to his son. And in this case, it was sons. And so in the end, there was only 3 things of worth: the mill, the donkey, and the cat. And times being what they were, the sons knew that if they called for the town magistrate or the local attorney, next thing you know, they'd whittle that little bit of an inheritance down to nothing. They'd nickel and dime them to death. And so they just kept everybody else out of the picture, and they decided to go ahead and divvy up the spoils themselves. So to the oldest son went the mill. To the middle son went the donkey. And to the youngest son, as these things often happen, the youngest son got the cat. Well, the youngest son wasn't going to have anything to do with that. He was pretty upset. Looked at his brothers and said, "Hey, you know what? You two can join forces and you go ahead and have a pretty healthy income. You guys could really take good care of each other. But me, what am I going to do with a cat? Once I'm done eating this cat and making, mittens out of his fur, I'm not going to have anything." Well, the cat heard all this, and he just pretended like he didn't. He walked up to his master and he bowed and he said, "Master, I think that we can take care of you. I don't think you're going to have a thing to worry about. I think that if you can take me down to the cobbler and I can get a pair of shoes and then take me to the merchant in the village so I can get a nice stout bag, we will make your fortune for you." Well, the youngest son was flabbergasted. Of course, he never heard a cat speak before, and at the same time, he thought, well, this is a pretty clever cat. I've seen him hanging upside down from a tree and catching mice, and he saw the cat throw himself in a bag of flour and dust himself all up so he looked dead. So when the rats would come by, he would catch them. He knew that cat was clever. He figured he'd go ahead and see what the cat could do. So to the cobbler, sure. So the cat and the boy and the young lad went down to see the cobbler. And when they walked in the door, the cobbler looked at the cat and says, "Oh, Mr. Cat, I think that we can go ahead and take care of you right away. You did a nice favor for me by catching those mice that were up in my leather. They were chewing it all up. For you, I'll make you the finest pair of Spanish leather boots that have ever walked out of this shop." And so he did. And so with the fine thigh-high boots, the cat went on down to the merchant who had bags of all kinds and styles. And he walked in, and the merchant saw him and says, "Mr. Cat, it's so good to see you. You took care of my rat problem out there in the storeroom. What is it that you want?" And the cat told him he wanted a nice big bag, a drawstring. And the merchant was more than happy to pass that along to the cat. So with that, the cat went off into the field. He went underneath a big tall tree and he opened up the bag a little bit, and inside he put some clover and he put some little tasty things that he found that he thought maybe a young rabbit would like. And then he lay down under the tree pretending like he was dead. Everything has its time, and sometimes you're just out and about, and you're just learning about life, and things happen. Well, that's what happened to the little local rabbit. A little rabbit, he didn't know anything about the ways of the world. And he went sniffing around, and he went sniffing inside that bag. And as soon as that rabbit ended up inside that bag, the cat pulled the drawstring and dispatched the rabbit. And he went off to see the king. And he walked up to the door of the castle, and he knocked on the door, and one of the guards opened it up and looked down at the cat. He saw the cat in those fine Spanish leather boots, and he said, "What can I do for you?" And he says, "Well, I'm here to see the king. I have this lovely rabbit for him." Well, with that, the guard took the cat up to see the king in his quarters, and the cat bowed before the king. "Your Majesty, I'm here presenting this beautiful rabbit to you from the Marquis de Carabas." And the king was very pleased. It was a beautiful rabbit. He says, "I will send this down to my cook right away. Thank you very much. And be sure to thank the Marquis de Carabas." And with that, the cat bowed and went off into the world. The next day, the cat took his bag back out into the field, different part of the field, and he opened it wide, and he took a stick and started beating the brush. And before he knew it, flock of quail went running into that bag. He drew up the drawstring, spam, spam, spam. He dispatched those birds, and then he went back to the king's castle. And he knocked on the gate, and the guard opened it up, and he saw it was the cat. And so he took the cat upstairs to the king's quarters, and the cat bowed before the king. "Your Majesty, I have here for you a brace of quail, courtesy of the Marquis de Carabas." Well, the king was pleased. Beautiful brace of quail there, and he says, "I'll take those down to my cook. It'll be for my supper. I thank you again, and I thank your master." And so the cat went off into the world. Well, the cat did this for a number of days. Days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. So by the time a third month went by, he was pretty comfortable going by the king's castle, and going up to see him in his quarters. The king was pretty relaxed about seeing the cat. And one day he was having a conversation, the king, with his footman, told him to prepare the coach for tomorrow because they were going to go take a ride along the river. And you're probably wondering who that they is. And it's like the king and his beautiful daughter, the princess. Yeah, across the land there was not a more perfect, more beautiful young lady. The cat heard this, of course. So he went running out after he bid adieu, running down the path and back to the village to where his young master was. And he stood before his young master and said, "Young master, if you play your cards right, and if you listen to everything I tell you to do, your fortune will be made." So the next day, the cat went down with the young lad to the river. And the cat told him, "So now I need you to go jump in the river and just swim around, enjoy yourself. And you just pay attention to what I'm about to do." And so the young lad went out into the river, and he was splashing around, having a good time. And down the road came the king in his carriage with his beautiful daughter, the princess. And soon as the carriage went by where the boy was in the river, the cat hollered out, "The Marquis de Carabas is drowning! The Marquis de Carabas is drowning!" And with that, the king, he leaned out of his carriage because he was wondering, what is all this racket? And he saw the cat, and he recognized the cat. He'd been working with the cat for the last 3 months with all this beautiful stuff that he was bringing in by the castle. So he called to his coachman and said, "Stop the coach!" And then he called for the footman, "Rescue the Marquis de Carabas!" And so they dived in, and they brought the boy back to the coach, and Puss says, "Your Majesty, I apologize for my master's estate here. A couple of thieves came by, and I was screaming out, 'Thieves, stop, stop!' And they ran off with his clothes." Well, he didn't want to tell the king that he had stashed the young lad's clothes under a rock. But the king said, he told his footman, "Open one of those trunks and fetch some clothes to dress this lad." And the footman brought out some beautiful royal they dressed up the young man. And, it's funny how clothes can make the man. And he wasn't just the miller's son anymore. He really fell into that role of Marquis de Carabas. He was a good-looking, stout, handsome man to begin with. And then, boy, put him in those nice, fine clothes. He looked like $1,000,000. Well, the princess looked at this young lad and thought the same thing. Wow. And her heart just started to flutter. And then the young Marquis de Carabas would do these little sly looks. He was trying to take a peek at the princess, too. She saw that, and boom, boom, boom. Her heart she just fell in love. Well, the king and the Marquis de Carabas and the princess went on down the road. Where was the master cat, you might ask? Well, he had run ahead to tell, folks as he saw them working in the fields. Like, for instance, he saw some mowers in the field, and they were out there scything the wheat, and he told them, when the king comes by, you tell them that this field belongs to the Marquis de Carabas, and if you don't, I'm going to come back and turn you all into mincemeat. Well, when the king came by in his carriage, and he leaned out, and he called to the mowers, he said, who does this beautiful field belong to? And they all said, it belongs to the Marquis de Carabas, because they were deathly afraid of being turned into mincemeat by the cat. And the king looked at the Marquis de Carabas and said, this is magnificent. This is a beautiful field. And the Marquis gives good grain every year. And they went on down the road. Well, the cat was still ahead of them, and he came across an orchard, and up in the trees were, all the orchard workers, and they were picking fruit. And he said, when the king comes by, you be sure to tell the king that this orchard belongs to the Marquis de Carabas, and if you don't, I will turn you into mincemeat. Well, the cat ran ahead, and then the king came by in his carriage and leaned out and says, who does this beautiful orchard belong to? Belongs to the Marquis de Carabas, said the workers, because they too were deathly afraid of being turned into mincemeat. So the cat came running down the road, and every time he saw some workers, he made sure that he gave them the same message. And the king kept on going down the road, and every time he did, he would hear this, this Marquis de Carabas, the Marquis de Carabas. He was pretty impressed. Kept looking at that boy, and he thought, Meanwhile, the cat ran ahead, and he came to this beautiful chateau. All these beautiful outbuildings, a grand courtyard, fountains and trees and flowers. It's beautiful. Well, it may have been a beautiful place to live, but inside lived the meanest and probably the most wealthy ogre in the land. And the cat went up and knocked on the door, and the butler opened the door, and the cat bowed and said, I'm here to pay my respects to the ogre who lives here in this chateau. And the butler let him in and led him to the dining hall. And the ogre was there. He was expecting friends. And he looked at the cat, and he was kind of amused. This kitty with the big, beautiful Spanish leather boots. And he said, what can I do for you? And then the cat bowed. I was passing through, and I wanted to, stop by and give my respects, my regards. I hear so much about you. The stories are just fantastic. And of course, the ogre was intrigued. He didn't realize people were talking about him. And says, oh, yes, said the cat. I hear grand stories, but they're so hard to believe. I hear that you can turn yourself into magnificent animals, huge animals, like elephants, or, giraffes, or whatever. But you know what? It's a silly story. I can't believe it. Well, the ogre looked at the cat and says, well, what's there not to believe? I can make that happen like that. And he did. And before the cat's eyes suddenly grew a massive lion. Roar! Said the lion, and the cat, meow, jumping out the window and ran up onto the roof. Well, I have to tell you, it's pretty hard to hold on to those roof tiles in those slick Spanish leather boots. But he held on, and he came down. He really got frightened there. It was a lion. He stood before the ogre, and the ogre had turned himself back into his old ogre self, and said, what do you think about that? Well, that was pretty remarkable, said the cat. But I hear stories, and I say, okay, big animals, okay, I saw that, but I hear that you can turn yourself into little itty bitty things, a little fish or a fly or a moth or mouse. Of course I can do that, said the ogre, and like that he turned himself into a mouse. Well, the master cat didn't waste a moment of time, and he jumped and he pounced and he grabbed that cat, bit it, ate it, and that was the end of the ogre. Just when all this was going on, just as he had finished his last bite, up to the drive came the king in his carriage with the princess and the Marquis de Carabas. And the king got out because he saw this beautiful chateau, and it was just all these gorgeous things there. And he got out and he was so pleased. And the door opened up and there was the cat. And the cat said, "Welcome, Your Majesty, to the chateau of the Marquis de Carabas." Well, the Marquis de Carabas was pretty impressed with his house too. And the king and the princess and the Marquis went inside, and they went into the dining hall where the ogre had previously laid out this sumptuous spread. The ogre's friends saw that the king was there, and they took off into the wind. And so they all sat down, and they ate, and they ate, and they ate, and the king probably had just maybe a glass of wine or two too much, because he leaned over and he looked at the Marquis. He says, "Son, it's going to be your fault if you don't, on this very day right now, ask for my daughter's hand in marriage." And so with that, the young Marquis de Carabas looked at the princess and said, "Princess, would you marry me?" And of course, she was smitten. She was in love. She says, my dear, most certainly. And that very day, the Marquis de Carabas and the princess, the most beautiful princess of the land, were married. And yes, this story has a happy ending because the master cat, old Puss in Boots, never ever had to worry about catching a mouse again. That is, unless he had inclination to. Dilly down Dale, that is the end of that tale.